Hello, and welcome to another episode of Battling Narratives. I'm your host, Lauren Morris with The Centrist, Inc. One of America's great minds, Walter Lippmann, wrote in his book Public Opinion that truth always rests with the minority because the minority is generally formed by those who really have an opinion, while the strength of a majority is illusory, formed by the gangs who have no opinion. Lippmann opined that even the soundest-minded of us are so susceptible to such unconscious surrender, it is a dangerous pitfall into thinking that our belief is the final word and the answer to complex geopolitical crises. In keeping with such topics as the madness of crowds and mass hysteria, Eleanor Roosevelt wrote, "When you adopt the standards and the values of someone else, you surrender your own integrity and become, to the extent of your surrender, less of a human being." So today again, we highlight for you the chaos and confusion over battling narratives over the Ukraine war and how they are shaping American public opinion. The Ukrainian people want to be free. They deserve the same rights and protections that our forefathers preserved for us in the American Revolutionary War, the war that France, Spain, and the Netherlands supported. So why do some conservatives with large audiences say that Ukraine should be defunded? While we understand that America is in crisis and we need to fund our own issues, and we support that 100%, it appears obvious to us that their remarks against Ukraine and its people are reiterating known Kremlin propaganda talking points. Instead of journalism that remains fair and credible, they have opted for crass narratives and outrage stories that do not properly educate the people on the realities of the battlefield, the history of Putin's repeated aggression against his neighbors, or his war crimes and genocide on the Ukrainian people. They dismissively say, "We are no fan of Russia." But as this war rages on, these dismissive and crass narratives deflect from the war realities, and worse, they create an environment of hostility and detachment from a people who need to survive, for a country that needs to be stable, and for a stable Europe. On September 15th, 2023, one such popular conservative claimed that a few days ago, President Zelensky had an interview with The Economist. He then lifts up a piece of paper and reads the following supposed Zelensky quote about what would happen if Europe stopped supporting his war. Specifically, that ordinary Ukrainians would start committing terrorism against them. Quote, "Curtailing aid to Ukraine would only prolong the war, and it would create risks for the West in its own backyard. There's no way of predicting how millions of Ukrainian refugees in European countries would then react to their country being abandoned. Ukrainians have generally behaved well and are very grateful to those who have sheltered them. They will not forget that. But it would not be a good story for Europe to drive those people into a corner." So we looked up this transcript from The Economist's September 11th, 2023 interview with President Zelensky, and nowhere in either the audio or the transcript were these specific words spoken by Zelensky in that particular interview. What he did say was that if the West fails Ukraine, the refugees will not be happy with their leaders. What the correspondent read was not from the September 11th interview. He then refers to Zelensky as the fake Churchill foreigner in a t-shirt, interprets the quote he just read to say that what Zelensky is telling the world is that the Ukrainians might just start bombing Paris. And finally, he claims that Zelensky is literally holding Europe hostage, saying that it needs to pay or face terrorism in its country. And finally, he claims that Zelensky is no leader, but a gangster. So these claims are outrageous and only serve to support Russian justification for their savage war. And I personally disagree that Zelensky is able to hold these people hostage. What is true is that Zelensky has well-functioning relationships with the European leaders who support the right and the ability for Ukraine to defend itself. Other trendy anti-Ukraine talking points are that the war is a family dispute in an arbitrarily created border, which is completely false, and that it is not a vital national security interest of America, that Zelensky engages in money laundering and other obvious and despicable crimes. This is also not how Europe categorizes the Ukrainian president, because Ukraine's neighbors thoroughly understand the threat of Putin and how he conducts war. So are our young conservatives who now find themselves as TV hosts, are they military or geopolitical experts on every topic? Are they experts on Russian history? Are they experts on Putin and his long-standing history of aggression against his neighbors? Who is really yanking the chain here? Because what they do seem to be experts on are false Zelensky talking points that sadly slander and mock the Ukrainian children and the people of Ukraine who are suffering a genocide from the expansive Russian president. Worse, the alt-conservative media have been engaging Colonel McGregor as their one and only expert. That is one place where these talking points originate. But McGregor's pro-Russian rhetoric has been exposed, and he faces constant, credible opposition for his false battlefield reporting. In fact, there is a mountain of military and geopolitical expertise opposing him. So it is important to know and understand your enemy, or you just may be swayed by them. So let's just see who disagrees with these unfortunate narratives that have targeted American conservatives and pushed them to the fringes of disinformation and landed them on the wrong side of history. David Howell Petraeus, retired Army general. Philip Mark Breedlove, a retired four-star general. Frederick Benjamin Hodges, retired U.S. Army officer. General Wesley Clark, retired four-star general and West Point valedictorian who holds degrees in philosophy, politics, and economics. Gary Yuri Tabak, who was a captain in the U.S. Navy and the first Soviet-born person to achieve that status. These are just a few of the distinguished American military men who are vocal on Ukraine and excellent sources to follow, and you can find similar across Europe and the Baltics. They are doing the job that the pro-Russian alt-conservative media are not, and that is telling the truth about Ukraine with integrity and dignity. There are 141 countries who openly showed their solidarity with Ukraine on March 2nd at the UN General Assembly and adopted a resolution demanding that Russia immediately end its military operations in Ukraine. And let's not forget that the International Criminal Court indicted Putin for war crimes of aggression and genocide. How about all the global companies that have pulled out of Russia after its invasion of Ukraine? What about the European leaders who support Ukraine, from Germany to the UK to Poland? Consider the dozens of NGOs, the humanitarian groups from around the globe, the millions of displaced individuals who have fled Ukraine. Consider the surrounding countries under threat by Russia: Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Moldova, occupied Crimea, Estonia, Germany, and the entire European Union. And how about our own Ukrainian Americans? Do they not matter? Are all these allies, these millions of people, wrong, and a handful of alt-conservative correspondents correct? The facts do not add up, and neither do the experience or the intellect in comparison. Our problems here in the United States have been decades in the making, and many of these problems lie within the management of the states and the cities. So will those who want to defund Ukraine, are they willing to take responsibility for the consequences of such scenario, having ignored the experts and the people who understand Putin? Will they delight in a bloody Russian victory and the continued Russian expansion into Greater Europe? Now is the time for Americans to wake up to this Russian propaganda and how it is making a mockery of our conservative media and detaching their audience from everything we stand for. I suggest we reattach ourselves to the plight of the Ukrainian people and we work together to stop Putin once and for all. I suggest we stand for freedom. This is Lauren Morris with the Centrist Inc.